Before leaving on a long business trip, Rachel made a solemn promise to her husband, Paul. "I'll be incredibly frugal while I'm there," she assured him, her voice full of determination. "They're providing housing, so thank goodness we won't have to pay for that. Every spare penny I can save, I will. I won't spend on anything unnecessary. And if you ever need something, just call me. I'll find a way to send money." Rachel's departure was bittersweet, but she took comfort in the fact that she had left things in order. Her sister, Emily, had agreed to move into their apartment while she was gone. This arrangement gave Rachel a sense of peace. However, as the days passed, she found herself questioning the decision to take on such a long overseas assignment. She had accepted the opportunity, not out of desire, but necessity. The prospect of finally being able to afford a home of their own had driven her to say yes, even though it meant leaving her family behind for an extended period. For 6 long years of marriage, Rachel had grown increasingly weary of constantly moving from one rental apartment to another, each one offering only temporary solace. Together with Paul and their little boy, she had navigated the restless, transient life that came with renting. It was a source of endless frustration for her. The instability weighed heavily on her, while Paul, to her dismay, appeared undisturbed by their circumstances. It seemed to Rachel that her husband lacked the same urgency she felt to build something more permanent for their family. Time and again, before leaving for the trip, she had urged Paul to make a change, to seek out a better life for them. "Paul," she would say, her voice a mixture of hope and frustration, "you know you could find a better job. Isn't it exhausting living on such a meager salary? We have a child now. We can't keep drifting like this. We have to think about the future." But Paul always responded the same way, shrugging off her concerns as though they were nothing more than passing clouds. "I'm fine with how things are," Paul retorted sharply, his voice laced with irritation. "I don't want to change anything. You act like switching jobs is as simple as flipping a switch. It's not. You have to take expensive courses to improve your qualifications, and who's going to pay for that? Then there's the nightmare of finding a new job, going through interviews, meeting new people. You know I can't stand that process. I hate it. I'm terrible at selling myself during interviews." Rachel sighed, her patience wearing thin but trying to stay composed. "Do you really enjoy moving from one place to another almost every year? We've never had a home that lasted more than a year before something went wrong. Either the landlord suddenly raises the rent without notice, or the place becomes unbearable with cockroaches and mold. I'm exhausted, Paul. I need stability for myself and for our son." Paul grumbled, avoiding her gaze. "As if cockroaches can't show up in a house you own. You talk as if owning a place solves everything, but that's not how it works. This isn't just a rental problem. I'm telling you, I don't see how we can increase our income. There's no magic solution for that. I can't just make money appear." Rachel felt her chest tighten, the familiar wave of frustration welling up. She had always been the one who carried the burden of looking for solutions, of trying to find ways to improve their situation, while Paul seemed content to let things stay as they were. He was passive, unwilling to push for anything better, and that passivity weighed on her more heavily with each passing day. She had never imagined their life would turn out this way. Back when they first met, Rachel had been full of ambition. She had studied to become a translator at university, and for a time, things seemed to be going in the right direction. She had landed a job at a small firm, and while the work wasn't glamorous, it paid decently and allowed her to contribute to their household. But everything changed after they got married. Almost immediately, she found herself pregnant, and maternity leave became her reality. During those years at home, Rachel hadn't been idle. She took on whatever freelance work she could find, translating documents for acquaintances or helping small businesses with contracts. It brought in some extra cash, but it was never enough to make a significant difference. The financial strain slowly grew, and with Paul showing little initiative to advance his own career, it felt like their life had stagnated. When it came time to enroll their son in daycare, an unexpected phone call disrupted the monotony of Rachel's days. It was her former boss, a man she had worked for before marriage, and he had an intriguing proposition. "Want to make some money?" His voice carried the familiar tone of someone offering an enticing opportunity. Rachel, who had grown weary of their financial struggles, responded with eager curiosity. Yes, absolutely. What's the job? It's right in your wheelhouse, he began, his tone suggesting the offer was too good to refuse. A friend of mine is launching a new business abroad. He needs someone skilled in languages, someone with your talent for translation. The job will pay well, but there's one catch. It's a long-term assignment, at least a year. If things go smoothly, you could extend the contract, but you'll need to be away for a while. A year abroad? The idea was overwhelming, but Rachel couldn't ignore the opportunity. The chance to earn enough to change their lives was almost within reach, yet a sliver of doubt lingered. Are you sure I can trust him? She asked cautiously, still weighing the gravity of leaving her family behind. I'd stake my reputation on it, her former boss replied without hesitation. I vouch for him completely. This is a solid deal, Rachel. And the pay? Rachel pressed, still unsure whether the reward would justify the sacrifice. I can't give you an exact number, he admitted, but I'll say this. If you take this job and work hard for a year, you could afford to buy yourself an apartment. And not just any apartment, a place of your own, something permanent. The words hung in the air like a promise. Rachel's thoughts raced ahead, envisioning the life she had always dreamed of. No more scrambling for rent money, no more frustrating apartment hunts, no more landlords raising the rent on a whim. This could be the key to stability, the chance for her and her family to finally put down roots. I'll think about it, she replied, her mind already turning the possibilities over and over. After hanging up, she sat with the idea for a long while, imagining how different their lives could be. That evening, when Paul returned home from work, she shared the news with him, the excitement palpable in her voice. Paul, she began, this is a once-in-a-lifetime offer. If I pass it up, we may never get another opportunity like this. In 12 months, we could save enough to buy a home. Think about it. No more moving from one rental to the next. No more packing and unpacking. We could settle down for good, finally put an end to this cycle of uncertainty. Her voice trailed off, searching his face for a reaction, for any sign that he might share her vision of the future. I don't know, Paul said, his voice thick with uncertainty. What about me and Adam? How are we going to manage on our own? Adam's just starting to understand things, and he's still so young. I wouldn't even know what to do if he gets sick. I can't handle giving him medicine, right? You'll be halfway across the world. You can't just fly back if something goes wrong. How are we supposed to cope? Rachel could hear the anxiety lacing his words, and it only deepened her own doubts. She had already spent countless hours agonizing over this decision, trying to balance the weight of her ambition with the well-being of her family. The idea of leaving Paul and their son behind was agonizing, but the opportunity, so rare, so perfectly timed, was too significant to dismiss. She had to find a way to make it work. I've thought about that too, she responded gently, trying to soothe his worries. And I came up with an idea. What if Lisa stayed with you while I'm away? She's only renting a room while she's studying, and her university is just around the corner. It would be a win-win situation. She wouldn't have to pay for rent, and you'd have help with Adam. She could be there to handle things if anything comes up, and you wouldn't have to feel like you're doing this alone. Paul's expression softened slightly as he considered this. Lisa, Rachel's younger sister, was responsible and dependable, and her close relationship with Adam meant that she wouldn't hesitate to help where needed. The thought of having her around seemed to alleviate some of Paul's immediate fears. Well, he said after a pause, if that's the case, it might work. But have you even asked her? Maybe she won't want to move in with us. What if she has her own plans? I haven't asked her yet, Rachel admitted, but I'm sure she'll understand. She loves Adam, and I think she'd be happy to help out. I'll call her tonight and explain the situation. She might even be relieved. After all, she's been struggling with rent herself, and this arrangement could make things easier for her too. Paul sighed, rubbing his hand over his face, clearly still conflicted but no longer completely resistant to the idea. I just don't want us to fall apart while you're gone. It's a big decision, and I know it'll be hard. Rachel nodded, understanding the gravity of what they were discussing. I know, Paul, but I truly believe this is our best shot at building the life we've been dreaming of. 1 year of sacrifice, and we could finally have the stability we've always wanted. There was a moment of quiet, as they both absorbed the weight of the decision looming over them. Rachel was 7 years older than her sister, Lisa, who was in the final stages of earning her teaching degree. The two sisters had always been close, despite the age gap, and Rachel knew Lisa would understand the gravity of the situation. When Rachel finally called her, it was with a mixture of hope and apprehension. She explained the overseas job offer in as much detail as she could, pausing now and then to gauge Lisa's reaction. "So, what do you think?" Rachel asked tentatively. "Should I take this offer or not?" Lisa's response was immediate and filled with enthusiasm, her voice brimming with the certainty Rachel so desperately needed. "Of course you should," she exclaimed. "Where else are you going to find an opportunity like this?" "Let's be honest, Rachel. Paul's not exactly pulling his weight. He's a good guy, but he's never going to make the kind of money you need to buy a home. He's too set in his ways." Rachel winced slightly at the bluntness of Lisa's words. She knew her sister wasn't trying to be cruel, just honest. Still, it stung to hear Paul described as a lazybones, even if she had often thought the same in moments of frustration. Lisa continued, her tone now more reassuring. "Listen, I'll move in with Paul and Adam while you're away. I'll help out around the house, and it'll make my life easier too. You won't have to worry about a thing. Plus, I'll get a break from my tiny, expensive room. Let me know when you need me to start packing." Relief washed over Rachel, though it was tinged with a certain sadness. She had hoped for Paul to be more understanding, more supportive, but Lisa's pragmatic response was exactly what Rachel needed to move forward with her decision. Lisa was right. This opportunity could change everything. Before leaving for her long journey, Rachel sat down with Paul once again, determined to ease his concerns. "I'll be saving every penny while I'm there," she promised, her tone firm yet comforting. "Housing is already taken care of, so at least we won't have to worry about that. Every spare cent I make will go toward our future, toward finally getting that home we've been dreaming about. And if you need anything at all, just call me. I'll figure out a way to send you money." Paul nodded, though he still seemed distant, unsure. Rachel could sense the unspoken fears lingering between them, but she also knew that this was the best chance they had for a better life. The final goodbyes were laced with the weight of their shared dreams and unvoiced doubts, as Rachel prepared to embark on a journey that would test them both in ways neither could yet foresee. Rachel had moved Lisa into their apartment with a sense of calm, trusting that her sister's presence would ease the transition for Paul and their son, Adam. Boarding her flight, she felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. It was the first time she had left her family for such a long stretch, but the promise of a stable future kept her focused. She reminded herself that this sacrifice would pay off in the end. It had to. As the months wore on, Rachel kept in close contact with Paul and Lisa. Their phone calls were short, but frequent enough to reassure her. Whenever she asked how things were at home, Lisa's voice would come through bright and confident. "Everything's fine here. Don't worry. We're living peacefully and just waiting for you to come back," Lisa would say. Rachel would always ask about Adam, the ache of missing him gnawing at her more than she cared to admit. "He misses you," Lisa would reply, "but we keep him calm. We tell him you'll be back soon. Don't worry, everything's under control." Paul was more succinct, his updates practical and focused. "We're managing. Adam's fine. Lisa helps with everything." There was little warmth in his tone, but Rachel took solace in the fact that at least things weren't falling apart. After 6 long months, Rachel finally arranged a short trip home. She had saved enough to justify the brief return and eagerly anticipated seeing her family. The reunion was bittersweet. Lisa greeted her warmly, smiling with her usual enthusiasm, but Paul was noticeably distant, his demeanor cool and distracted. His first words were not ones of affection or joy at seeing his wife but questions about money, his voice tinged with impatience. "So, tell me," he said the moment they were alone. "How much have you saved? Do we have enough for a place yet, or do we still need more?" The abruptness of his tone unsettled Rachel, but she brushed it aside. "We have enough for a 1-bedroom, she answered slowly. "But what's the point of that? If we're going to buy an apartment, we should think long-term. A 2-bedroom at least, or better yet, a 3-bedroom. We'll need the space as Adam grows, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have another child." Paul's eyes narrowed, and and for a moment, Rachel couldn't read his expression. There was no joy in his response, no shared excitement over the progress she'd made. Instead, his mind seemed elsewhere, calculating. "Then keep working hard," he said, the words landing with an unsettling finality. "I've been thinking, Rachel, maybe you could start sending the money to me?" Rachel blinked, caught off guard. "Why?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The question had come out of nowhere. "Well, just, I could keep it safe," Paul replied, his eyes not meeting hers. Rachel hesitated, a quiet alarm rising within her. There was something in the way Paul had said it that made her pause, a subtle shift in his demeanor that she couldn't quite put her finger on. At first, Paul's persistence about the money didn't trouble Rachel. She trusted him implicitly, and the request seemed practical enough. After all, they were building a future together. She brushed off any lingering doubts, and the conversation soon shifted. Once again, she packed her bags and left for the next leg of her overseas contract, determined to keep her focus on securing their dream home. As the months wore on and the contract neared its end, Rachel's employer approached her with an offer to extend the assignment. The conditions remained excellent, and it was tempting. After all, the financial benefits were undeniable. But on the other hand, the ache of missing her family had grown stronger. She hadn't seen her son, Adam, or Paul for nearly a year, and the thought of continuing to be apart tugged at her heart. Torn between duty and desire, she picked up the phone and called Paul. To her surprise, Paul was adamant. "While you have the opportunity, keep working," he urged. "Don't even think about saying no. We still need money for renovations, and we don't have a car yet. There's so much we need. My colleague, by the way, is selling a 2-bedroom apartment. It's big, bright, not on a corner, and he's offering it for less than the market price. He needs to move quickly, so he doesn't have time to wait for other buyers. Maybe we should buy it?" Rachel paused, considering the offer. "Maybe," she replied thoughtfully. "Can you send me a video tour of the apartment? I'd like to see what it looks like. If I like it, I'll find a way to send the money, and you can move forward with the deal." Paul wasted no time, sending her a video tour of the apartment the very next day. As she watched, Rachel felt a wave of optimism. The apartment was spacious, filled with natural light, and had a warmth that made her feel as though their future could finally take root. Convinced, she transferred the money to Paul, trusting him entirely to handle the purchase. Her faith in him was complete. It never crossed her mind that anything could go wrong. A month later, Paul called with what seemed like good news. "It's done. The apartment is ours," he exclaimed. "Lisa, Adam, and I will stay in the rental for now, though. The landlord took out all the furniture, and the place is bare. We need to do renovations, but the money's all gone." Rachel's heart sank a little at the last sentence. How had the money gone so quickly? But she didn't voice her concern. She trusted Paul and understood that setting up a home required significant investment. Without hesitation, she emptied her remaining savings and sent more money to cover the renovations. "Here," she said, on their next call, "this should cover the materials. Let them sit until I can send more in 2 or 3 weeks." But what started as occasional requests soon turned into an endless stream of demands. Paul no longer asked politely, but rather expected Rachel to provide. The tone of his calls shifted from cooperative to insistent. He wanted more funds for not only the renovations but for furniture, clothes, groceries, transportation, and even expenses related to Adam's care. What was even more surprising to Rachel was that Lisa, too, began calling her, asking for money for seemingly every little thing. Rachel found herself working tirelessly, saving nearly every penny, denying herself any luxuries. Her days were long, filled with the grind of her assignments, and yet every hard-earned dollar seemed to disappear as quickly as she could send it. Despite the growing pressure, she kept pushing forward, holding on to the hope that one day, this relentless sacrifice would lead to the stability she had long craved for her family. When the time came for Rachel to renew her contract for the 3rd time, she felt a familiar ache in her chest. Despite the good pay and professional success, the distance from her family had become unbearable. Sitting in her office, she hesitated and finally spoke to her employer. "I need a few days to think it over," she explained. I'll discuss it with my husband. Honestly, I'm leaning toward coming home. It's so hard living so far from my family, and I miss my son terribly. Determined to surprise her loved ones, Rachel booked a flight to her hometown without telling Paul or Lisa. She envisioned the joy on Adam's face when he saw her and the relief of reuniting with her husband. As soon as she landed, she stopped by a local store to buy gifts, small tokens of love and reconciliation, hoping to make up for the time she had missed. With her heart racing, she quietly unlocked the door of the rental apartment they were still living in while the new one was being renovated. The familiar sound of laughter floated from the bedroom, and she smiled, eager to step in and embrace her family. But as she opened the bedroom door, her world shattered. There, in the intimate space of her own home, was Paul, her husband, holding her younger sister, Lisa, in his arms. Rachel froze, disbelief clouding her thoughts. The gifts she had carefully chosen slipped from her fingers, falling to the floor with a soft thud. Her scream pierced the silence, a cry of pain and betrayal, but Paul barely flinched. His eyes, once warm and familiar, were cold now, devoid of remorse. "What did you expect, Rachel?" he said with shocking indifference. "You left for so long. I'm a man. I need a woman's affection. Turns out, Lisa's like me for a while now. We lived together, got to know each other better, and realized we can't live without each other." Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. "I've been working without a day off, sending you money, sacrificing everything for our future, and this is how you repay me? Cheating on me with my own sister?" Paul shrugged, his expression maddeningly casual. Before he could respond, Lisa, calm and collected, added, "Where's the child, you ask? He's at daycare." "Rachel, don't shout. It's unnecessary. This is your fault. You chose your job over your family, and now you're reaping the consequences. Your work was more important than your happiness." Rachel, her voice hoarse with disbelief, could only stare at Lisa in shock. "You're blaming me? You've lived off my money, taken my place in my own family, and now you expect me to just walk away?" Lisa didn't blink. "While you're here, Rachel, do us all a favor and file for divorce. Paul doesn't want to live with you anymore, right?" She looked over at Paul for confirmation. He nodded without hesitation. "Lisa and I want to get married," Paul said matter-of-factly. Rachel, her face pale but her spirit unbroken, clenched her fists. "Fine. You want to marry her? Be my guest. Good riddance. But I'll be taking Adam with me." Paul laughed, a sound so cruel it sent shivers down Rachel's spine. "Who's going to give you Adam? He calls Lisa Mom now. He barely remembers you. You abandoned him for work, and I've got all the evidence to prove it. Any court will leave him with me. You're a stranger to him, Rachel. Just leave us alone and let us live our lives. Thanks for the apartment, by the way. I really appreciate it. Now go back to your job and find your own happiness. You can afford more than one apartment with your salary, so don't bother us again. For our son's sake." Tears welled in Rachel's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Her voice trembled with fury as she turned to Lisa. "Thank you, Lisa, for looking after my husband, and for taking my place so easily. You've lived on my money, taken over Paul, and now even my son calls you Mom. You've made yourself quite comfortable." Lisa didn't flinch. "You were never here, Rachel. You chose this life." Rachel swallowed hard, her resolve hardening with each passing moment. She would not walk away quietly. She would not allow them to steal her life, her son, and her future. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Fighting for Adam would be a battle, one she wasn't prepared to lose. Rachel continued her work, but this time, instead of pouring all her energy into saving money for Paul, she sought out the best lawyers in town. The courts would hear her side, and she would fight for custody of her son, refusing to let Paul and Lisa rob her of the one person who mattered most. The apartment, too, was hers. She had worked for every cent, and she wouldn't let them take that from her without a fight. Paul and Lisa might think they could walk away with everything she had built, but they had underestimated her strength, her determination, and her will to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Rachel's journey was far from over. The betrayal cut deep, but it wouldn't define her. She was no longer the woman who left for a job to support her family. She was a mother, a fighter, and she would get her son back, no matter the cost.